afternoon, everybody. Thank you. I'd like to call to order the Monday, October 28th, 2024 Watertown Board of Adjustment meeting. Can we get a roll call?
Yes, Dargis Johnson.
Here.
Dolly.
Here.
Ford.
Here.
Oletsky. Here. Kays.
Here.
Brink.
Here.
Culhane.
Here.
And Spire is the alternate, and we have a full board of 7 members, so we definitely have a quorum. And so for today, do you want to run down what we need for yes and no's for conditional use and variances? So we have 4 conditional uses being heard and then 1 variance. And I did not do the calculations because,
So 2/3 majority of the present and voting members is 5 out of 7.
and
And the conditional use has been updated to follow the same.
yep. And so that's the same thing because today it's the same thing. So it's,
Okay. The 210202 that's referenced on the agenda actually specifies 2/3 for conditional use as well.
yep.
that
And the
template
only
been updated?
difference is that it is the members present and voting for the Board of Adjustment. Or for the variances, sorry. So 5 for both.
Most recent change that we were going to follow state law.
I believe that does.
State law stipulates that it is the simple majority for all those present and voting for conditional uses.
2/3 of the members of the board. Okay, yeah, but it's 2/3 though, is what we have or have currently in ordinance. So we'll check into that.
Okay. And that was based on the most recent recodification that we just went through and updated those.
Yeah,
figures.
just an amendment, no recodification.
Okay. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on that agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda's moving forward. 4A on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the October 10th, 2024 meeting.
Moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Just one comment on this, Brandy. In the digital agenda online, the hyperlink for the meeting minutes actually prompted a user login and password. So
yeah.
Maybe look at that.
And yeah, see, that's what's odd is that we ran into that before.
Yeah, I couldn't
Did
tell
anyone
why it was
else
doing
run
it.
into that this time? Okay.
You could see them if you opened the agenda packet and they were included, so they were still accessible. But if
Okay.
you click the hyperlink on it, it was prompting the login.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look into that. I know that's happened before. So yeah, thank you for letting me know.
I'll need a motion approval. Yeah, sorry. Is any discussion on those meetings? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor of those minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are passed. We'll move on to item 5A on the regular agenda, and this is a conditional use permit for storage units in the C1 district. I'll turn it over to you, Brandy.
Okay, thanks, Blake. And then I'm just checking on this conditional use for our last amendment here. So requires the affirmative of the majority vote of the members.
We're required to have 5 persons here to have a quorum to act on the Board of Adjustment
Yep.
actions.
Yep,
But BOA actions for the CUPs is those present and voting.
yes.
4 for CUPs, 5 for the variance.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So now let's get back to our agenda. All right, so this is a conditional use request for the property at 202 First Avenue Northwest. This is the building just down the street, actually, on First, across from the fire department. And the applicant, Frank Bossi, is requesting a conditional use for storage units where, and this is also zoned C1, community commercial district, and it will be an indoor storage facility, climate control, And as you know, we talked about this when it came forward for the business park district, when a request like this was made. And then at that time, we amended the ordinance to include the definition for a storage facility indoor, but we have not implemented it into other districts. So at this time, storage units is the appropriate conditional use to ask for. And then when we come forward with additional ordinance amendments, we'll be able to implement that actual definition of indoor storage facilities into the other zoning districts. So that is the request, that there's not going to be storage outside of the building. And this is the, oh my gosh, it just drew a blank here, but the International,
It's
Harvest-
the old Jensen building.
the old Jensen, we've been calling it, okay. So, yes, the International Harvester Building, yes,
Jane's,
okay.
It was
I-
Kane
I literally thought that I had this song stuck in my head or something, that I was blanking on it. So, I think with that, I will stand by for any questions of the board.
Are they going to tear the building
No.
existing? They're going to, wow.
Yep.
Yes, I think in the packet, there are some renders that we could probably reference on the screen here as well.
Yep, I have those pulled up.
Brandy, in terms of storage units in the downtown area, the old Napa building that's just on the block here, that also has indoor storage units. Presumably, we used the older version. There's just plain storage units for that as well.
Yep. Yep. It's the only thing that's available.
Yep.
The other thing right across the street, the old Barclay building has storage in that. It used to be the old First District office.
We do have a public hearing on this, so I'll open that at this time. If there's anybody here to speak on behalf or against.
And I think that was Frank Bossy was online. So Frank, if you're able to unmute, take it away.
Hi, how are you? Hi, calling in to try and get a conditional use permit for this building that we're looking to redo. We sent over the renderings. I'm hoping you guys can all see that.
Yeah, we do have that shared here in the room.
Okay. So basically, we're trying to do exactly what you're talking about. We're trying to do indoor climate control units and follow the rendering as close as possible. And I know that it's in a historical society location, but I was told that a rendering wouldn't be a problem getting it passed. I don't know if that's an issue. I just want to make sure that that's going to be a non-issue for us.
I'll ask Carla if did you look up that on the National Registry?
I didn't see it listed as one of our contributing build. It's in the downtown overlay, but not listed as a historical building last I checked, but I can verify that.
And even with it being in close proximity to the state historic district boundary, it's a simple application that you submit to SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, and then they can just give the check off that it's not going to be a contributing factor or a contributing building for the proposed remodel to the downtown overlay district, which it looks like you are retaining, the historical components potentially. And that just might be one of the requests with like cornices and whatnot.
Okay. Okay. So what is it, just an application that we need to fill out and send in? And who decides this? Is it the building department that makes that decision?
So ultimately, the city council could appeal if, say, that SHPO was against it, but SHPO will make that decision. And that's actually something like after if you have the conditional use or not, then staff can help you with that process. But it is a very straightforward application process online.
Brandy, maybe help Frank and explain what SHPO is,
I thought I did.
or maybe you did.
So it's the State Historic Preservation Office. And then, so they're a recommending body to the municipalities. And because it could be impacting, even if it's not an actual historic registered building, it can have impacts to as it being adjacent in within the district. So that, but staff will walk you through that, Frank, after we have, after we know where, if the conditional use is granted or not.
Okay, okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Vassy, it's stipulated in the application that you're not looking to be doing outdoor storage associated with this building. Would you be averse to a condition being placed on your CUP saying that there would be no outdoor storage?
I would be fine with that. We have no plans on doing outdoor at all.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Mr. Vassi, since this is such an old building, have you had, or what are your plans for having an asbestos inspection?
I didn't have plans on doing an asbestos inspection. It's all concrete. There's really not too much in this building. The company that we were hiring that was gonna do the cleaning inside the facility is licensed for asbestos removal in case there was anything that comes up. He's already inspected it. He basically told me that there's nothing in there that he sees. So it's kind of almost like a shell, basically. There's a few non-load bearing walls in there that we're taking down just because we want an open space. So it's really just an open space that's been vacant for some years, and it just needs a good cleaning basically before we can do what we need to do.
You might look into the state law that requires notification and some application and form to be filled out regarding asbestos, no matter what the building, whether it's empty or not, before you start your renovation. There is a
And-
state law that requires that.
And that is something that staff oversees with the building permit issuance and/or demo permits. That's all part of that.
Thanks.
That then we can explain that to the applicant as well. Same with the SHPO. Right now, we're just looking at the use.
Yep. Thanks, Brandy. Any other questions?
Chair. Mr. Fossey, how do you plan to manage that property? Are you going to have someone on site, or, because I assume you're not local?
We're not local. We're gonna have someone on site. We'll eventually hire somebody to run the facility, and it's a one-man operation. It doesn't require a lot of staff. They run themselves pretty much. Everybody would have basically a remote entry, and then they have their own lock in their units. So it's really a one-person operation to come in, sign in, and then that's pretty much it for as far as staff.
Okay, so there would be a contact person here in Watertown, should there be trash left behind when a tenant leaves?
Absolutely.
All right,
We'll
thank you.
definitely hire someone local to run it.
Thank you.
Any last questions? Do you have the public hearing open? Thank you, Mr. Vassi. Is there anybody else here to speak on behalf or against this application?
I'd like to just ask some questions.
Yeah, if you could come forward, state your name in the microphone for the record. You're going to ask questions of the board or of city staff?
Well, on the project. So my name is Jim Vanilla, and I represent Turco and Cutting Edge, which is buildings directly to the west of that building. Obviously, we looked at that for so many years, and you look at bricks falling down. You do own the space in between. You have any plans for that, Frank?
I think the questions are supposed to be directed to the board or city
Okay,
staff.
whoever. Okay, and that's the question I have is we
It's-
worry about what's going to be, going on in the around it. I mean, like, there's gonna be trash, people are gonna come there, and sometimes they, oh, I didn't want that, put that in, just throw it aside. Parking, you know, they got a ramp right there, someone gonna back in our lot to get to that ramp.
Yeah, so with this being the C1 district downtown, there are 0-foot setbacks. So but you can see in that space in between, they're not, and there's already going to be a condition for no outdoor storage. But then there's not, I don't think they plan on extending that building, but I mean, they could build out to the extent of their lot lines. And then they have the alley and the street for any vehicle maneuvers. But if it would become an issue or whatnot, you know, like there are, like you could put fencing up or whatnot in that respect too, but I do not believe that is the plan at this point of doing any additional expansion of the building, of the footprint.
Okay.
In terms of the questions around refuse collection of parking, they would be subject to the same city standards that we have on other developments.
Yep.
Correct?
Okay.
And that'll be addressed as they go through the permit process through City Hall and engineering.
Yep. And then to the disrepair of the building too, obviously having somebody, having this property conveyed and having somebody putting a use into it will be great, because we did have to send notice about the disrepair of the building and broken glass and trespassing and whatnot. So it'll definitely be nice that you'll have an actual, you know, a property owner and a tenant and whatnot in the space.
Okay, just regarding the building itself, on the inside of it, can I ask questions on that?
What we're trying to decide here today, the purpose of this meeting, is whether the use is acceptable in the district.
Got it. Okay.
Any other questions or comments in the public? I'll close the public hearing at this time. Do you need a motion for board action on this?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I would make the motion to approve the conditional use permit as requested, with the condition that there would be no outdoor storage associated with the storage facility. It would all be indoors.
We have a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Case, second by Aletsky. Any additional comment from the board?
Chair. As we talk about city planning, and particularly our downtown area, city-centered area, I want to caution against storage units in these areas. I feel like storage is one of the lowest uses of land and/or buildings that we have, perhaps second only to parking when we talk about this kind of stuff. The only reason why I would support this would be the fact that it has been vacant, so something is better than nothing. It's been vacant as far as I can recall in my 35 years, probably exceeds my lifetime it's been vacant. And the fact that it is really kind of on that sort of quasi-industrial part of downtown where we're kind of getting away from the heart of it. But I don't want to set a precedent. I know that there's the one right behind City Hall right now. I don't want to set a precedent where we're hollowing out our historic downtown, city center downtown for storage of stuff. So I'm not opposed to voting for it. I'm not opposed to this one. I'm not opposed to Mr. Vassy and his project. It's probably, like I said, it's probably better than nothing. But as we go forward, I think we just need to be cognizant of not approving these whole hog.
Can I make a comment
Yep, Randy.
in regards to that, just with planning background, and as Liam touched on there, I do think, you know, that's why it is a conditional use in the C1 district, that you guys are looking at them at a case by case, and proximity to other areas within the downtown or the C1 district. But something to keep in mind as well are like living units downtown are typically smaller with maybe not as much storage availability. So it is also a nice use with it being in close proximity, where if somebody is leading an autonomous life of not relying on their vehicle, that they could walk and have that as storage, and then also the climate control.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I would echo supporting Liam's comments as well, and perhaps maybe the deeper dive at some point in time would be to maybe put in some sort of an overlay protection area to preclude that sort of use on camp or what have you, and some of those, if that's what we're really trying to protect.
Yeah, seems like that's something that, it could be done. There's obviously higher priority things to be looked at, but it is also something that we don't see come before us very often. And that's where, with it being a conditional use, the board has the opportunity to review.
Yeah, and my
Yeah,
guess is
certain-
the market is going to dictate. There aren't probably many buildings, even if there was another developer that wanted to do something, there probably aren't very many buildings that would be
And
amenable to this.
this building, again, I mean, you've got the loading dock on the south side, which makes it a decent thing. It's been an eyesore for 2/3 of my life.
Yeah, I'm excited that something's happening to it as opposed to it just continuing to.
Right. Yeah, we certainly wouldn't want to see, storage units as a permitted use. Conditional use is certainly appropriate so that we can have these discussions. Yeah. Any other comments before we take a vote? All right, we'll take a roll call vote. Brandy, if you could.
All right, Dargus Johnson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes?
Ford,
Yes.
Oleski,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Colheim.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to item 5B on the regular agenda, which is another conditional use, this time for a boathouse in the R1 district. Brandy, can you take us through that one?
Yes, thank you.
Before we get going, this the time, my husband and I, we are across the street from that, and we have been notified. Does anybody see a problem with me sitting here, or should I recuse myself? Yes, I do.
You should be fine then.
Okay, good.
Okay, no problem. So this is a boathouse request for 934 South Lake Drive. And I'll pull up the parcel here, but the lot is 34,300 square feet, zoned R1, single family residential, which requires a minimum of 9,000 square feet. They are requesting a boathouse structure for a total of 320 square feet, and then with the flat roof, so that there is the gathering space on the top. They're 41.5 feet away from the ordinary high water mark, so this could be permitted as an accessory structure. But then, actually, what's not shown on the site plan is there is a small garden shed that was brought to our attention that needed to be permitted and has since been applied for, but it was placed before without a permit, which does end up happening if people are unaware or whatnot. So this is the existing garage. However, it's not just a garage, it's also the living quarters, and it's the primary structure for this property until at a later date, the previous property owner was going to, build the primary, and then this existing garage would turn into the accessory, or the detached garage or attached, whichever way it's designed. But so that's where coming forward for the boathouse conditional use is why that's in front of you, even though it could, like I said, with it meeting setback requirements of the 30-foot front yard setback required for the ordinary high water mark at the lake, it's still going forward with it as its use will be for jet ski storage and lake equipment storage. So with that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
So I get a little confused back and forth. So at the lake, are we restricted to the number of accessory structures we can have on the lake?
No, it is anytime. It depends on the lot sizes of how many accessory structures you can have, but it doesn't apply to if it's at the lake or in town.
Okay, so at this lot, is there a maximum number of structures, accessory structures that can be located on the lot?
Yep, they can have a boathouse, they can have a primary, they can have an accessory over 200 square feet, and accessory less than 200 square feet.
So the boathouse, because it's a conditional use, is not considered accessory.
Right.
Brandy, about a month or so back when we were looking at some of the ordinance amendment language, there was an illustration that we talked about the maximum height at 30 feet from the, or 30 feet from the ordinary high water mark, right? This is sitting back farther than that. Is it in compliance with the height and placement?
Yeah, so it actually is built into the topography, so it's a non-issue there, and it's a structure, so it's not considered a deck.
Okay, perfect. We do have a public hearing on this one as well, so I will go ahead and open that at this time if there's anybody here to speak on behalf or against, or if there's anybody online.
Yeah, Charles, if you do want to unmute yourself and speak on behalf of any, with this topic, Charles is the property owner. And Tony is.
Yes, sorry about that. I was talking and it was on mute, so.
Okay, we
yeah,
can hear you now.
Looking to build the boathouse so we can keep, some of the water toys down there, and then also on the real windy days, be able to still, enjoy the water and watch our fishing lines from right above the dock. So that's the idea, the purpose behind it.
Thank you, sir. Is there any questions for the applicant? Looks like no questions from the board. Thank you, sir. Anybody else here to speak on behalf or against while the public hearing is open?
There is a shed up by the road.
If you could just state your name just for the record, please.
I'm Tony Arnold. I'm gonna
Thank
be working with Charles on this project. But there is like a little garden shed up by the road. And we were gonna actually move that off of the property so that won't be there. That way we won't be interfering with any ordinances there.
Okay.
And it's not today anyway, because you can have a shed there.
Well, I think, yeah. Well, it'll probably be whenever if we can do this, then it'll be when we start that.
Yeah.
And that'll follow the same standard permitting process in terms of permit for the shed.
Yep, yep. And so like after any conditional use is approved, they would have to get a building permit application for this project too.
Yep. This is just a conditional use. There is no variance requested on this project, right?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, one more time, I just want to make sure, do we have any requirements that restrict the number of principal uses in a residential zone? Like only one
Yes.
principal? And so a conditional use for a boathouse is not considered a principal use as would a residence at the same time on the same lot, two principal uses?
No.
We're distinguishing that, we're separating it. We're calling it a conditional use, but it's more accessory to the house. But if I didn't have a house on the lot, I could just still get a boathouse on the lot.
No, because a boathouse is in the ordinance as an accessory structure, but the way about going about only lake lots can have boathouses.
Right.
So they are a separate section, rather than when it talks about a garage greater than 200 square feet, less than 200 square feet, and attached.
So the boathouse is just off by itself, because I think Mr. Chair, I did receive a phone call from a adjoining property owner who had questions about this, and I said I couldn't answer it because I just wasn't well-versed enough in it, and it hasn't precluded how I'm going to act or decide on this, but I'm just trying to clarify it in my mind that we've got a boathouse, we've got a shed, we've got a garage within but then we might build a house on there someday, so I could theoretically have a detached garage without living quarters, a house, a shed, garden shed, and a boathouse.
Right.
But the boathouse doesn't count in the whole aggregated number.
Right.
Okay, just want to make sure I understood that.
Yep.
Yep.
Thanks for the clarity on that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So you said that that's a garage, so there's no residential home on there right now?
No, it's labeled a garage, but it does have the living quarters as to be the primary structure. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to permit it. And then in the future, most likely they'll do a larger home or living quarter, like do an addition. And then at that time, say that it was an attached garage, they wouldn't have to remove the living quarters. But if they do a detached structure, they have to remove the living quarters from that current garage.
So we already have an issue that's not approved. we have somebody living in a garage, which we don't allow in town.
Yeah, no, this was permitted as a primary structure. They have it labeled in the site plan as a garage.
Oh.
But I noted that just overlooking that because we did inspect this is a primary structure because it's, I mean, however they go forward with the future, but it is a permitted conforming structure.
So today, it's no different than a house with an attached garage. It's all part of one structure, is the principle.
Okay. And do we allow water and sewer down to the boathouses?
If they want to.
We do, okay. And then if we allow that, how does that stop people from living there?
Same thing we run into with detached garages. So when they get a permit, if it's straight faced, like we've had people before, when they have a loft, if they have like a bathroom up in the loft or something, it's just like doesn't really meet the straight face test. And then also when we're doing our inspections, if we see things that are looking as if they are additional living quarters, then we point those out and have them fixed or revised.
Okay, and this is already owned by a LLC, correct?
Yeah, I think it's Charles Perrick, who is
But it is a VRBO at this moment, or rental for them?
no idea on ownership purposes because we just go that
It's owned by, like, I don't know, it's an LLC. It's not by by Charles.
But does
name.
he live there? Or does he, okay. I'm just concerned with it, if you're going to have, if it is indeed just renting or a, vacation spot, that we have someone living up in the garage and then we have someone living in the boathouse or renting it, however you want to look at it.
and keep in mind too, it is 320 square feet.
True. But I can still spend a weekend in 320 square feet.
Yeah, and we're not going to have any living quarters down in the boathouse.
Okay.
And it is something that my family personally uses each summer. And the purpose of the LLC is, just for liability planning, being the nature of that it is a lake house. That's just how our attorney wanted it drafted. So that was the reason that we purchased it inside of one of our LLCs.
Thank you.
Chair?
You're welcome.
Yes.
Brandy, just to flesh out the, just informational and background, if they do run water and sewer to the boathouse, this one or any other one, do they have to have a separate connection to the main line?
No.
They can run it through the house?
Yep. So that's actually, when we just brought that wastewater, well, we brought it to council because it was from chapter 17. We just actually clarified that because it was a matter of interpretation between wastewater and engineering that how the ordinance was written in a way that made it sound like every building needed an independent connection. But as far as for administering these regulations when we're issuing building permits, we want to reduce the amount of times that somebody has to cut into the street. So when there's not the possibility of it ever being a standalone structure as a primary structure, then we are fine with them daisy chaining it or connecting it through the from the home connection and then bringing that over. Now, if it were a situation where like someday that they could sell the garage and sell that as a separate lot, we look at those scenarios and then discuss with the property owner of their options. So because if it is a primary structure on a set, and you can only have one primary structure per lot, then it has to have its own connection to the main.
Thank you.
I'd expect it's somewhat of a difficult situation to put water in a boathouse, just given the terrain and the elevations of some of these properties.
I think that the prior owner had a camper down there along the shoreline connected to the sewer and water.
Any additional questions from the board, comments? Anything else from the public while the public hearing is open? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. And look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion by Brink. Do I have a second? We'll need a second to take action.
I'll second that.
Second by Oletzky. Comments or discussion by the board? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
All right, Gohan,
Yes.
Brink,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Hetzke,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes,
Dargis Johnson.
Yes.
that passes unanimously. That is approved. We'll move on to item 5C on the regular agenda, which is another conditional use. This one for bar or tavern in the C3 Highway Commercial District. Brandy, can you take us through that one?
Okay, yes, thank you, Blake. And just checking with Carla, did you get a hold of the applicant?
She's going to try to call in, but she's just working.
Can we check if she's online yet?
Yep. Is Maria online? And if that is, no, it doesn't appear anyone's online.
Nobody's online.
Okay. So maybe if we want to just put this one down, I mean, we could go if she ends up calling in or not. Otherwise, too, we can go ahead with it.
I'm fine just moving forward.
Okay. So this is at the property at 711 9th Avenue Southeast. It is in the same building that El Tapatio, or maybe just Tapatio these days. But where this is in the location of where the UPS store used to be. Now that they have moved, then this space was available. So it will be a separate restaurant and bar. The applicant is Maria Rodriguez. I believe that she had some affiliation previously with El Tapatio. And then there is also a grocery store in this location. There are 3 units available. You'll see the site plan here. Oh, sorry, there's 4. But El Tapatio has the 3 and 4. So this area is the furthest to the west. It has 1,872 square feet. Something unique about this property is, so it's Zone C3 Highway Commercial. Whoa, what is going on? Okay. And they have the only issue is the parking, which I explained here in the agenda item, where it has 28,476 square feet. So that's conforming to the minimum lot size in the C3 district, which is 20,000 square feet. Whoa. On the property, there are currently 36 parking spaces available for all the units within the strip mall, but 47 spots are required for the current use, including the existing restaurant. So the existing restaurant requires 27 spaces, the existing grocery store requires 7 spaces, and the proposed restaurant would require 13. So there's the allowance for a 20% reduction for the required parking spaces granted by staff, which that would reduce it to 38 parking stalls. And so obviously they're too short. And with a building like this, depending on the different uses that go in, sometimes the parking criteria is different. And if it is a permitted use, like they could put a restaurant in there today, but the fact that they're asking for the bar tavern to have on sale is why the conditional use is before you. And we don't have the change of use permits, so we can't really regulate after a building is constructed, which is something that we looked at, when we did our ordinance amendments to the off-street parking requirements, so that we're more broad of different types of uses, so that before it was very specific on the use, but we don't regulate that unless they need a conditional use. So just to keep that in mind, but just wanted to point that out.
So if this
That'll
same
stand by for any questions.
building were constructed today, would the standards for the number of parking places that are mandatorily required be different than when it was constructed?
It's hard to say for what, it was constructed in 2003. So, it's hard to say, if they just did general commercial at that time. But that's kind of the tough thing, is that we still do have requirements. We've just made them more broad, I guess, as far as the restaurant, where a lot of commercial uses have the same parking requirements. So it used to go, like for a restaurant, they used to go off of number of seats. And so we changed that to be, I think it's 1 per 250 square feet. So we went off more of a basis of that nature.
Because it can be very difficult to know what's going to go into these buildings, but it doesn't seem like the uses that we're talking about here are abnormal for a strip mall building,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Yes.
Brandy, when the staff grants the 20% reduction for required parking spaces, what criteria do you use?
There really is none. And so that's actually when it was implemented. So we amended the ordinance in 2020, where it's more so because we don't want parking to make or break a project. And a lot of the times you can have less. And so that it's more of a, in a way, I think a trial and error of seeing if we can pinpoint consistency. A lot of the times people are able to meet, because we also looked at, we reduced the parking in some respects for some uses when those amendments were made, but we wanted to provide flexibility because 20%, that doesn't end up really reducing a significant amount of parking. But it can help if it's gonna make or break a project.
I see that point, but I've driven by that parking lot with El Tapatio in there, and often the parking lot is full. And so the 20%, perhaps, when you talk about make or break a project, we can also talk about the 20% making or breaking what happens to El Tapatio, an established business, if part of their parking is now taken up by this new restaurant. So that's why I'd hoped there was some criteria of some sort that to base that on,
Well-
not just that it would hurt a project, because we have to look at the business that's already there also.
Right. But I think that, with it being a strip mall where El Tapatio is a tenant, as well as this new business would also be a tenant, it is the property owner's issue, where if El Tapatio, who has double the space of this unit, who needs 13 spaces, or no, they need 27 spaces, I think it would be something that they would need to address with their property owner, because we're not giving a reduction on this project because it's already installed. It's already constructed. So it's just the use. And so I think that becomes a private market or tenant space decisions.
Mr. Chair, at El Tapatio, they also have outside dining space too on the east side of the building, and it kind of, the parking and stuff gets really crowded with the driving and the parking too.
Yeah, and a lot of, where did we land with that? Did they receive a permit for that?
We're working with the property owner currently to finalize some of that permitting. There is some confusion from the folks who run El Tapatio as to what the requirement was, but we're actively working on clearing that up.
Okay.
Is that a sidewalk cafe style permit or?
No, because sidewalk cafes are just when they're within the right of way. So there was confusion because a patio doesn't need a permit, but the patio space that they installed does impact the required parking spaces.
Okay.
So that's the reason then we are in touch with them,
Okay.
which came to light, with an application with this application, with it being one property owner, just making sure that everything's in conformance and permitted.
Yep.
Chair.
Yes.
So to Diana's point about that, are the other tenants notified of this business going in?
No. So unless the property owner notified them. I mean, we would have sent the adjacent landowner letter to any property. I mean, because we go from the lot boundaries. So,
El Tapatio could be blindsided by the approval then. I mean, to some degree, if they know nothing about it.
Carla, do you know, did you just take the 250 feet from and that's how it's written in ordinance. So yeah, I mean, because they're not property owners, they are tenants.
It looks like they're already open. You know, the door and the window and everything. It looks like it's going to be a nice little restaurant.
Cool.
Well,
Yeah, they got their remodel permit, which is what triggered this conditional use.
Ultimately, any of that, conversation of who's responsible there for notification, who gets the parking places is the owner of the property, and it's their responsibility to manage this with their tenant base. It's not what we're talking about here. This is simply conditional use. Is this type of use valid, acceptable for this location?
And it's allowed 2 doors down.
Yeah. In the building already.
But it is, because we're not requiring the normal amount of parking, so it is kind of on us.
The building has already been constructed, and we've already said that this type of use is acceptable for this structure.
I don't know. I go to El Tapatio probably more than any other single person in Watertown, and I've never had a problem parking, even when there was 8, 10 people going into UPS. I'm not even the least bit concerned. I think the worst I ever had to do was park on whatever that is, 6th, one time. I go there probably twice a week. I don't foresee this being an issue, and it's like Blake said, are we cool with having a bar and tacos there when there's a bar and tacos 2 doors down?
For that though, do you feel the need to recuse yourself? Is there a conflict?
I don't think there's a conflict. I certainly love El Tapatio, by the way. It's one of my favorite restaurants in all of Watertown.
I'm just kidding.
And if I thought it was going to negatively impact them, I might vote this down, but I don't think it is. And I can't wait to go have tacos and michas or whatever's on the board. So
We do have a public hearing on this, so again, if there's anybody here to speak on behalf or against, or if anybody's joined on, we do have the public hearing open.
One comment I have, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Does this whole conversation make us, as a board, think we should get out of the parking requirement business? I mean, because, if this business would have been built in 2003 as a warehouse, the parking requirements would have been 1 per 1,000. There would have been required 8 parking spots. And then over the time, things get revamped. We did a building 2 agenda items ago that is completely a different use than what it was when it was built. I mean, we don't know what future needs are when the original site plan's built. I mean, should we, as the board, be who determines how many parking spaces? Or should that landowner decide whether or not they have enough parking spaces? I mean, to go off of Liam's point, I mean, my favorite restaurant is Dagwoods, and I always park on the street there because they probably don't have enough, but they still get business. I mean, and if they felt that was a concern, they could move locations or, change. I mean, I don't know. We've had multiple items where parking's been an issue, and we redid our parking ordinance about 3 years ago and reduced the requirements. But I wonder if it wouldn't be best if we got out of them. I know that's a planning commission item, but just kind of sparking that seed.
It's a good conversation topic, and it's certainly something that a lot of communities just have to deal with because they don't have, square footage to put a dedicated parking lot. And you deal with, people get out and walk a half a block or a block or have public parking. But to some extent, I agree with the sentiment.
And I mean, it makes sense when they initially put it in, but every time there's redevelopment, I mean, the parking requirements will be different. If it was a warehouse, this would be a complete non-issue.
Or maybe the parking requirement should only be germane to the initial request, and as things comes on, they can figure it out from there.
I mean, I do think that there's validity to including it just as information, so it's not completely off mark here of what they're requesting is kind of the biggest takeaway. But coincidentally, at the South Dakota Planners Association, conference, we did have a session on parking, and there are some strategic ways that, like, I'll look into as far as our parking ordinance goes of thresholds of time. So like, when you have mixed uses, like your residential tenant and then your commercial tenant is 8 to 5, and the residence is usually 5 to, 8 a.m., 5 p.m., so they're offset times. So it's like that they can do like shared parking type of things and have reduction that way. So definitely a takeaway from that conference and something that I'll continue to look at with our ordinance. And right now, so what was interesting, and Diana, this plays into your question about the having some guidelines for the 20% reduction. What was interesting is that Sioux Falls implemented this, and they have noticed that it usually reduces their parking by 20%. And I was like, so why not just cut it all by 20%? But it's something that they are looking at too, of where just everything falls with it, because obviously they have spreadsheets and whatnot that they plug these things into, so it's straightforward and easy, but still something that, if something is consistent, and it kind of creates a policy on its own then, and then ordinance eventually.
Chair?
Yes.
I will only say that for me, trying to decide if something is an appropriate use for a building, parking is included in an appropriate use for a building.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
So I'm kind of following Diana here, and again, I don't have a problem. I'm fine with the conditional use. If we had the parking, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, in my opinion. So we got a side patio, which I love to eat outside, so I hate to see that go away, because I do like to eat there also. What the applicant, we don't include the landlord on this at all, and, that parking on the side, on the east side, I didn't realize that was diagonal parking over there. In fact, I don't know if there's any striping on that parking lot left anymore. So with this new business going in there, again, to me, it should be the landowner, the landlord paving that or striping that. I don't want to put that burden on the tenant, but there's really nothing to hold their hand to the fire to make them mark these spots out so that we can clearly see the reduction in parking. We're allowing it, but at least we'd have markings for the 28 spots we will have. Is that something we can put on this? And I don't want to put it on the tenant, but.
Yeah. So when they move forward, and Carla's going to jump in too, but when they move forward with their building permit, that's something that we can require of the property owner.
Right, because they're the one benefiting from the business going in, so,
Carla, did
I
you
think
wanna-
asking them to do that
okay.
would be.
Yep, no, that's good, because that is the thing, is that ultimately it's something that the tenant needs as as part of their request. And then it is a responsibility of the property owner that they should have them striped anyway.
All right, at this time, I'll close the public hearing. So, and again, really good discussion here. It's all certainly stuff that we need to consider in the wider conversation. However, the question before us today is a conditional use request for a bar tavern, a use that already exists in the same building. I'll need a motion and a second from the board to take action.
I'll try my motion with the striping of the parking lot as a requirement.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any additional discussion on that?
Chair?
Yes.
I am concerned, and I still include the parking as part of the use. Also, I am concerned that apparently El Tapatio did not receive an official notification of this project, even though the ordinance doesn't require it. I have some trouble with that.
I think what they're saying too is there is signage already up too on the building, so hopefully they're observant and asking questions on their part.
Because that is part of our public noticing requirement, is that the CUP must be posted on the property in advance of this meeting. Any additional comments from the board before we take a vote? All right, we'll take a roll call vote.
All right, Oletsky,
Yes.
Ford,
No.
Kays,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes?
Brink,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Cohen.
Yes.
6 yes, 1 no, that motion passes.
And Jeff, lucky for you, we have Dagwoods. With all the, if everyone can go around and please tell us your favorite restaurant.
We'll move on to item 5D on the agenda is a conditional use request for a home occupation.
And that is Dagwoods for lunch. No, don't get confused.
Yeah,
That,
not an agenda item.
okay, thank you, Blake. So this is for a home occupation at 701 4th Street Southwest. The property is zoned I-1 light industrial, but there is a existing single-family residence that is on the property. And it's kind of an interesting makeup here because obviously there's residences on the west side, but then you have or on the east side, and those are zoned R2A. And then you have the railroad track and Watertown Iron and Metal there to the west. But obviously there's separation there with that railroad track. And so this house, I believe, was constructed in 1909. Let's see here, if I put that on here. Oh, that's the wrong one, that's why. Okay, oh. Originally, in 1977, a building permit issued for an addition to the house, okay. And then in 1995, so when the addition was added to this house, it showed, the permit showed the property as being zoned R3. And then in 1995, another building permit was issued, and then it said it was zoned R2. And then the comprehensive land use plan shows this being zoned as industrial in 2005.
Long-range land use plan shows that it should be industrial, not zoned industrial.
Well, and it is zoned industrial.
That I think that's, yeah, we said that in the land use plan that it should conform, but it was always been zoned industrial even though we were calling it R2 and R3. I was confused.
Yeah, see, I'm confused by that too. Because from our records, like there isn't anything that shows that it would have been rezoned. So honestly, what my take on it is that it has been zoned I-1, but obviously, like whoever the building official was at the time issuing building permits was just putting it as a R2 or R3 for whatever reason. Yeah. Yeah, which shouldn't be the case today. That's why we're here. So a home occupation, then now also in the I-1 district, residences are not allowed, but at least this way they are going towards the home occupation conditional use request, and because the house is legal nonconforming. So in the I-1 district, as a conditional use, you can have uses that are in the general character of the district that may not be included. So then that's where home occupation comes into play as a business, similar to like a retail establishment. So here though, so this is for a dog grooming business. And another thing to mention is that I included the standards for home occupations listed here, the 1 through 9 on your agenda packets, and underline the some of the main standards that I think just need to be pointed out. Is that no non-resident employee may be employed on the premise at any time, and a permitted home occupation may be operated or maintained as an accessory use only in the principal building and or attached garage as defined. So the property owner or the applicant, Tevin Sigurdson, is the acting power of attorney for his father's property at 701 4th Street Southwest, which is the property that we're looking at today. And then that he is requesting for the dog grooming business to utilize the property. And because he is actively maintaining the property and is residing there part-time as his second home while residing at the property. So basically, the single-family home is the primary use, but then basically when he is there, it is being used as a residence, but then he would be also performing his business there. So it's a second home.
But to be a home occupation, don't you have to be residing there to be a home occupation?
Yeah, well, but he is, I mean, nobody else is.
I agree with you, Todd.
So I could live where I live where I live, and then I could go across the street and run a business out of there and saying, well, I live across the street and this is my secondary home and I'm gonna run a business across the street.
Yeah.
I disagree with that interpretation, but anyway.
Yeah, no, I looked into their interpretation, and like it is, I'll even go back to the app because we did break this down, and I don't think that we have the right to for ownership wise or the amount of time that you spend at one place. So, and then you can't have employees, so it has to be you as the resident.
But are we allowed to expand a nonconformity use into a nonconform? I mean, if I have an existing nonconforming use, which i.e. is the residence, and I'm going to be expanding that residence with an accessory use, which is i.e. the home occupation, which wasn't there at the time of the zoning of I-1, aren't I then expanding the actual use and therefore being inconsistent with the nonconformity section of our ordinance?
No. Because they're
Why?
asking for the conditional use request, and you can, like, that's an existing structure, or it's an existing use. So until the house would go away,
But it says in your ordinance, in our ordinance, that any nonconforming building or land use existing at the time of this ordinance may be continued even though such building structure or land does not conform. We're there with the house in an industrial zone. Any such existing nonconforming use may hereafter be extended through any part or parts of the building, but that would be the existing use. So the housing could be extended throughout the building, but a use such as such as an accessory use. But if we're calling the accessory to the industrial zone, and that's how you're backdooring it, I'm just trying to, wouldn't we be better off just to say, if we don't anticipate this property ever becoming industrial, that we should just rezone it to a residential zone?
see, but I think that you're not, like, it's a use. So the house was built, I believe, in 1909. And I don't think I have that on the packet. But, when the house goes away, any of these residential uses do. But the house exists. And instead of rezoning a portion that's adjacent to the railroad, I think that if the house ever goes away, then it should be industrial.
So there is residential zoning across the street from this property,
Yep.
though.
Yep, R2A.
So what's the reason that we wouldn't rezone this property to R2A?
For what I just stated, that it's adjacent to the railroad.
Chair,
Yes.
do we have a definition, Brandy, of what it means to be a resident?
Yes.
And what is that?
I'm pulling that up for you right now.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to do home occupation first. Any occupation which is clearly secondary to the main use of the premise as a dwelling and does not change the character thereof or have any exterior evidence of such secondary use other than non-illuminating sign not exceeding 400 square inches in area. The occupation shall be carried on or conducted only by the members of the family residing in the dwelling. So and then I need to go to, which definition were you wanting, Diana?
The definition of being a resident.
Okay. So for like a dwelling unit, I'll look at residence though, but let's look at this quick. Or a dwelling, any building or part thereof which is designed or used exclusively for residential purposes by one or more human beings, either permanently or transiently. And then a residential unit is residential accommodation including complete kitchen facilities, permanent installed, which are arranged, designed, used, or intended to use exclusively as living quarters for one family. And then for a resident, I don't know if we define resident, Diana.
So I guess my problem is, when you're talking about that the resident should be the employee, but this is a second home, is this in fact his residence, or is his primary home his residence?
If you were to take a look at,
Have an issue with that.
I think when you take a look at the definition of home occupation, it says it shall be done by the members of the family residing on the premise. And if I live in the northwest part of Watertown, but I have my business at this residence in the southwest part of town, I would say, where do I vote? Where do I send my children to school? But though, that's where I am residing. That is
Right.
the school district, or that is the voting district, or the ward that I am. That's where I reside. And so, being that residence is not defined in the ordinance, the planning and zoning, the Board of Adjustment has the ability to determine whether or not that the structure is being used as a residence. Now, if it's his father's structure, and his father was the one that was applying for the home occupation, and his son, you could make that leap of faith a little bit easier, being a family member.
But I disagree with that because he doesn't reside at the property either.
Yeah, I think it's the residence component for home occupation. I'm just trying to thread the needle, and I think that's the difficulty I'm having.
I think residency is traditionally defined as domicile and intent to remain. I think, and it's been a long time since I've been to law school, and this is not legal advice, but that's my recollection, is it's the two-factor residency test is domicile, which means you're actually there, and then intent to remain. Somebody could double-check me on that, but you could look at things like owner-occupied tax status. You could look at things like what Todd's saying, voter registration. You could look at those things when you talk about intent to remain.
There's blacks.
And, so this is, like, these are conversations, obviously, that staff has had before bringing it to the board. And I think it comes down to occupancy where that's not our place. And
But it is the Board of Adjustment's decision. It's not a staff decision. It's the Board of Adjustment's decision to interpret and apply the regulation. So not
Sure,
that,
yeah.
I appreciate what you guys are doing, I think, but I think it's something that we have to determine as the board of whether or not residency and whether or not the use meets the definition.
yeah, I'm just saying that staff brought it to you with taking that into consideration.
And it's a tough one.
Chair, to what Todd's saying, why don't we just leave it as a I-1 and let them do their dog grooming? You just can't live there. I mean, so we take the residential aspect away, and it's just not a home occupancy anymore. It's just a dog grooming place where it would be allowed.
But what would happen if 5 years down the road, they decide to sell it and it becomes a house again? Does that change anything?
Yeah, once it goes away, it's not supposed to come back.
No, yeah, so that's a choice they'd have to make at this point. They can either take it, industrial, or they can leave it as residential and not get the home occupancy. I mean, that's kind of,
The applicant is here too, if he has anything to add that might be enlightening to the board.
And I will at this time open the public hearing. If you'd like to come forward, if you state your name for the record and the microphone there.
Tevin Sigurdsson. So the main reason for leaving it as a residential property is that if my dad were to move back to Watertown, that is where he would need to go. So my dad suffered a fall a couple of years ago, and he's currently living in a home, so I'm maintaining the house and set to inherit the property when that day does come. But if he does come home, he needs to be able to live in his residence, is why it needs to maintain the house status.
What is your home address?
My home address, 500 First Street in Henry.
Thank you.
And before applying, I couldn't find definition for residence, but to respond to what you were saying earlier, when you roll up to the home occupation section of the ordinances, it specifies any current structure being used as a residence that is non-conforming is still able to apply for a home occupation. So that's why I kind of went this way. So if my dad, which is very, very low percentage, ever were able to come home, then he could still live in his house while we still be able to build the business in the 25%.
Because then you would have to live with him.
Correct.
The use that's being applied for dog grooming, are you anticipating doing any dog boarding?
Not at this time. If I could ever switch it to Industrial 1 and get a kenneling conditional use, then that is something we would look to. Like I said, I need to make sure that it would be completely legal and everything for my dad to move back in if that ever were to happen.
And so the intention with the animals, there would be no animals present on the property without you being present on the property.
Correct. We do have maybe like a bird and a cat that are ours that live at our house now that would maybe come to Watertown and be stored like just at the
I think you can have up to
other
4
residents.
You can have up to 4 pets.
Okay.
So
But at this,
I think
Mr.
it's
Chair,
4, maybe 5.
But at this point in time, you're not planning on leaving your residence of Henry, moving to this structure, residing in this structure, up until the time your father may or may not come back.
Yeah, it just depends on what the definition of residence is, because we do reside in the structure quite often. We do spend the night there, and we do use it as a home base kind of in Watertown. Like we have clothes there for our kids, we have all of our stuff. We live in Watertown, that's where our kids go to school, but we spend weekends here in the summer, we do lots of different things at the house.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Tevin, it's not anything, I mean, it's not like the home occupancy is there to protect the neighbors. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So we can't just have, houses sitting around where I'm doing a home business, but I'm really not there. So it's protecting, and so if we open this can of worms, it takes away our integrity of saying straight-faced no to, other situations that aren't full-fledged home occupancy. That's the line we're walking here. If we kick the door in, we no longer have any control on that home occupancy ruling. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I think in my opinion, your best bet is with your father's chances of coming home, and that's unfortunate because that's not any fun to deal with. But I think you would be better off in your situation, because if you do want to expand your business, is to give up your residential.
And that's my long-term plan.
Then that would be my
But I do have to
suggestion.
get that far in the process, to where my dad's
And I
comfortable
would wish
saying
you
I'm not going to be
good
coming
luck
home.
with that. And I do think that we would, as a board, would probably favor that more so than giving you the home occupancy in a home you're not going to be at for the very reason, like Blake said, if you're not there and there are animals and we can trust you, but we can't trust the next person. I think it's just too much of a leap of faith to give you that, in my opinion. So
What criteria do I need to meet for that to be my home? Do I need to live there every day? I can't stay at the property I own in Henry at all? Or do I need to switch my mailing address? What would make that my home?
Where are you
And that's
where
where-
are you registered to vote?
Probably still in Watertown, as I never re-registered when I purchased my house.
And that's where staff landed with how do you distinguish it?
Would
It's not
you,
defined.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Being your life circumstances that you're kind of in a holding pattern due to your father's circumstance, and your long-range vision would be to either, turn the house into a boarding or a grooming center, and you know that this time is the one thing that you can't control at this point in time. Would you be open to the idea of a temporary permit for 2 years to do this, to get you through this transition, and at which time in 2 years, you either walk away from the home occupation or you turn it into an industrial use.
In 2 years, could we, if it was approved for a 2-year time, could I reapply for a conditional use?
Understanding though that that, you know, it could be a different board here, different people, and
Right.
it wouldn't happen for you.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know, I'm just throwing this out, I'm trying to find out, this is a unique situation, it's industrial zone property. If this was a different residential, say it was zoned R3, and you lived in an R2 zone, or you lived out of town, I'd be at a hell no right now.
Right.
But I'm trying to find a solution.
And that is something that we've done in the past. We have put a time fence around it and required applicants to come back in to the board if they want to extend it past that date.
I mean, the uniqueness that this is an industrial zone property, and that it's not a residential to a residential situation. You do live in Henry, you've attested to that. You still have time spent here in Watertown. It is a functioning residence, but you don't live there. I mean, in my opinion, you don't live there. You live part-time there, but you don't live
Right,
there.
and what criteria do
Right.
I have to meet to?
And I don't think the rules are there, but so I'm trying to find an avenue for you to
Right.
give you time to.
I
Get
am
you
willing
through
to
this.
do the 2 years and then come back in front of a board and either reapply for the.
I don't know if they're on board with us. I'm trying to throw out a bone,
All right.
I think you're throwing out a can of worms.
and that could be two.
So owner is any person, agent, firm, or corporations having legal or equitable interest in a property or premise, or who, by virtue of an existing legal relationship, have direct control over a property or premise. So I don't think that, we don't have anything in ordinance that specifies what, I mean, if somebody wants to have 4 homes, that's their prerogative, but they are the property owner, or in his situation, the power of attorney, of how much time he spends there or not.
But the ordinance also says to have a home occupation, you have to be a resident. The family has to reside.
That's true.
Right. It doesn't say the owner has to. It says,
Whoever's doing the occupation has to reside
reside.
there. And being that residence is not defined in the ordinance, it has to fall back onto the Board of Adjustment to make the determination of what a residence is.
And I do believe we've had those conversations with other families in the past that wanted to have family members that didn't reside
Right.
also come in and work at the home occupation.
Right.
I think the one thing, so back to your comment, Rhonda, about opening up a can of worms, to some extent, I don't agree with that statement because this is zoned I-1. So it's not like we're allowing this in all residentially zoned properties. From a land use standpoint, is dog grooming acceptable in an I-1? I don't have any problem with that. This is a question around home occupation. It's a really unique situation.
That's where I'm at.
Well, that for Tom's putting a time limit on it, I'd rather see that we let it happen in I-1, and then in 2 years, we go revisit if it's suitable to go back to
Yeah,
residential.
but I think that, as Brandy said, this stipulates once I change the use to a conforming use in the industrial zone, the house is gone. And I think there's probably a better chance that house is going to be there a lot longer than an industrial use is going to be on that property. And so if he's planning on starting a business, grooming a business, I'm sorry, not using to be punny there, but getting a business established where it could then very well be put to a different industrial zone, to a different commercial, maybe that's it. We didn't receive any comments from any of the adjoining property owners, I'm assuming.
No.
And I do want to say, when they put
Carla?
People called inquiring what the use was going to be, because we didn't specify that in the letter, but nobody, once they found out it was a grooming business, nobody who called to ask what the use was had any problems with it.
And just for the record, I was talking to the neighbor, and what I can see existing under there, it was a dog grooming, in-home dog grooming place before.
when your dad was living there?
No, previous to my dad purchasing the place. But all the existing plumbing is in place. It's all, I mean, you can see exactly where it was, how it was set up, and the neighbor who's been there for a long time confirmed that's what it used to be.
It wouldn't be the first home occupation that didn't go through the process that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any additional questions from the board for the applicant? I do have the public hearing open if there's anybody else to speak on behalf or against, if there's anybody online. Thank you, sir. I'll close the public hearing at this time. We'll need a motion to act on this.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to start by just laying some foundation and then making a motion and letting the board determine whether or not it's the right path. Being that this property is a residential use in an industrial zone, making it non-conforming. However, being that there is evidence, but by testimony, that the dog grooming business had gone there in the past. Furthermore, talking about that the person doesn't live there, making it difficult to meet the definition of a home occupation, but is looking at transitioning the use of that property over time. And by still not opening the door of having a non-resident living in one part of town and doing a business in a residential zone in another part of zone not applying, I would go forward by making a motion to approve the conditional use permit contingent upon, one, that there would be no animals overnighting or boarding or any of those, no breeding activities going on site. Two, that the applicant would need to present himself within 2 years of the date of the issuance of the conditional use permit to either ask for an extension or change the use to comport with the industrial zone of the property.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion from the board before we take a roll call vote? Okay, Randy?
Okay,
Good.
so one
Oh, sorry.
question quick. If that, okay, well, I don't know.
I have one question, Mr. Chair. So is home occupation a condition of the I-1 zone? I mean, is that, I'm confused as how is that, I mean, it's not a permitted use or a conditional use, is it, or?
So that's why it's in the first paragraph under conditional use, and I explained that in the agenda item background of why it's in front of you today.
Okay, so if this fails, he could petition to go I-1, or he is already. He would still have to petition to get, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, a use for the dog grooming. That's still not allowed in that. He still would have to come for a conditional use?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Case.
And those making the second, I want to amend my previous motion to state that he has to come, if this is granted, he's got to come back in 2 years, da-di-da-di-da. However, if it fails, he still has the option to come in, no, he can have a conditional use for a grooming business, but he just can't reside on premise.
Second as amended.
What?
So basically, what I'm saying here is that the conditional use is granted to have a grooming business on an I-1 structure, a structure that's I-1. He can't reside on premise. Or if it passes, he can live on premise. We can call it a home occupation, but he's got to come back in 2 years and come and find a pathway.
We need to take those as two separate actions, Todd, from a standpoint of if we wanted to,
Like what's the motion? Because and also what you're saying is not accurate because he would still have to get a different conditional use.
Okay, so he didn't apply for that.
that was my point.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I take that back, Liam.
So I think we can only act on what we've got in front of us.
I understand.
Okay, so getting back to my question then, just real quick, Todd. So if it fails and he has to come back for conditional use, at that point, he would probably want to go right full-fledged for not only dog grooming, but dog boarding. Correct?
If I had to come back as an I-1, I would try to do it as a commercial kenneling.
Okay, just
Yep.
so you understand, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we have the motion by Todd. It does have a time fence of 2 years on this. He'll have to come back in front of the board if this passes. Any additional discussion? We'll take a roll call vote.
All right. Kays,
Yes.
Ford,
No.
Oletsky,
That's a tough one, but I'm gonna have to go no also.
Brink,
No.
Dolly,
Yes.
Joyce Johnson,
I'm with Bonnie, it's tough, but no.
Colhane.
Yes.
3 yes, 4 no, that motion fails. We'll move on to item 5E on the agenda, which is a variance request for a side yard setback on an accessory structure. Brandy?
Okay, so if you guys recall, this application was before you previously, and then it has since expired since it's been over a year since the variance was granted. This is for a property at, so yeah, that was in 2022. So it's for the property at 324 Second Avenue Southwest. When this came forward in 2022, it was an would have been an attached garage, which would have been requesting the same setback, side yard setback of the 6 foot 2 inches as what is being proposed today. So you can see, and I didn't include the previous application, but previously they had, the garage was shown closer to the west, which was closer to the street. Which there was a condition that they could not have a garage door because otherwise they were closer than 25 feet to the street. So now they have reconfigured, and I'm actually just going to, since I think this will be easier and might strike a memory. The vicinity map maybe does too, with the little access area to the south as well. But so now they have slid. All right, here we go. 324 Second Ave Southwest. Let me zoom there quick. Oh, Ave. Okay. I'll let that do its. Okay, well, that is thinking about doing it. All right, so before, the garage was going to be closer to the right-of-way here. Obviously, this right-of-way is 80 feet, which is excessive to the 66 feet that would be required for a local street standard Mondays. And so now they'll be stepping it back to allow for additional stall and width, but still would like to utilize the 6 foot 2 inch side yard setback. And it will be detached, as you can see in the exhibits, but then will be the 6 foot 2 from this property line. And the applicant is here to answer questions. We did go through, different options again. And he can talk through that. I think a lot of it is where there are existing trees located on the property, and then also being able to maneuver into the garage door of not being further towards the north.
Thank
And
you,
with that, I'll
Brandy.
stand by for questions.
And I'll open the public hearing at this time.
Hello, Jonathan Pruitt. So yeah, we originally put a variance in 22 to have the garage attached to the side of the house, with there not being a garage door going to the west just because of it imposing into the sidewalk with it being moved forward. So we were fine with that. After drafting it up and trying to get it to really work and function as a 2-car garage, it doesn't. So now we're trying just to get variance to keep the same side yard setback, but moving it back into the property, because as you can see, we have plenty of property at the back. We do have some long-standing trees back there, so we're trying not to push it all the way back, so we're not having to take down any trees that have been around almost as long probably as the house, so.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Does your neighbor to the south have any issues with what you're doing? Have you talked to them?
I've actually knocked on his door several times and never got a response.
Did we receive anything from comments from notices?
Not from that neighbor. There was one adjacent landowner that said that they would prefer to not have it pass. They didn't give any reason when asked, like specifically why, just
Did they
weren't
say
in
which
favor of it.
neighbor that was?
It would be the neighbor to the east.
Chair?
Yes.
So as I understand it, you have the room without this 6-foot 2-inch variance to move the garage farther north. You just don't want to take out some trees. Is that correct?
Further north, like just behind the house?
You have that large side yard there.
Well, we do actually have a couple pine trees that are in that area as well.
Right.
So we're just trying to maintain the same visual path that the garage, the single car garage is currently set on, without taking away from the aesthetics of the yard or the house and keeping it still conforming to like the property size.
But you have a lot of room there that if you took some trees down, you could move the garage and have the 9-foot setback.
Absolutely. We could
You
kill
could.
trees, yeah.
Yes, you could kill trees.
Yep.
And you would have the 9-foot setback.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I think it is important to note too that the existing garage is at that 6'2" setback today.
And the previous request that came before us, that was approved with the 6'2"?
Correct. Yep, and variance to the front yard setback too.
Brandy, from the minutes of that previous decision, were there any justifications or findings for the approval of that variance?
I will look that up. I gotta think about which is gonna be my best way here.
I think we have the minutes in the folder as well. There was a condition put on about the door that the applicant mentioned, but nothing as far as findings went that I saw when I read through the minutes.
Oh, there it is, I'm sorry.
Okay. So, yeah,
Yeah,
so there was a 9-foot, 1-inch front yard setback variance with the stipulation, yep, just as Carla stated, and then same with but yeah, no, not a lot of discussion there.
So we did take those as two separate actions, though, at the time.
Yep. And that was October 6th, 2022. And it passed unanimously, and there were 6 members,
on the side yard, the 6'2".
both,
Yeah.
Yep.
and the front yard, yep.
And so the principal difference now with the request that's before us is we're not asking for the front yard any longer. We're asking for the same variance request on the side yard setback.
Correct.
We're making use of the existing driveway.
Yep.
The setback for the side yard is no more egregious than the current small garage that's on the property.
Correct.
Chair.
Yes.
Do we have a height on the garage this time, or did we last time? And what can that go? I mean, the sidewall,
Yeah, 20 feet.
you could go 20 feet?
Oh, sorry, the sidewalk can only be 12. The overall can be 20.
Like, wow,
Yeah.
okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
What is the intended sidewall height on the garage structure?
It'd be less than 12 because it's just gotta be high enough to get out of the house structure and then, of course, make way down to the garage level.
This is probably just gonna be your standard.
It looks like it on the rendering.
Yeah,
so that's what I
the
was saying.
rendering shows that, yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? Do we have anybody else online to speak on behalf or against this item? Any other comments to the board? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. We'll need a motion and a second to take action.
I'd make a motion to approve the variance as requested.
Second.
A motion and a second. Other comments? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote.
Okay. Brink,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes?
Ford,
No.
Aletsky,
Yes.
Colhane.
Yep.
Sorry, I couldn't remember if I went you or Brink.
6 yes, 1 no. That motion passes. Moving on to item 6 is open public comment. I don't believe we have anybody here to speak on an item that wasn't on the agenda, so we'll move on to new business.
None that I have.
Any from the board? How about old business?
And then just as a reminder for the CL discussion, Carla, if you want to give us a rundown, there's discussion happening for the board or for the task force today, and then there'll be that joint Plan Commission Board of Adjustment or Plan Commission City Council meeting that just as a reminder. So I'll let Carla take it away.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much really sums it up. It'll be a joint meeting to go over where I like the use of task force has kind of what they're thinking. That agenda is on the city website, and it'll be held at the public meeting space at the police department
And what's the date?
on November 4th at 4 o'clock.
Thank you, Carla. Thanks, Brandy. Any additional old business from the board? Okay. I will take a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.